Welcome to Chapter 3 of the Mother Book. We're going to continue in our exploration of this handbook, this manual for being when one lives without a living teacher. The nature of the atmosphere, or the opportunity of the atmosphere, is what the purpose, the reason the Mother Book came into existence, was how to move into relationship to this constantly descending force of grace. It's said in Indian tradition that Guru is grace, as well as the path. The uniqueness of Guru is this transmission of grace. And it can be feminine or masculine or neutral. I know when the grace first descended into me in 1998, it didn't have any particular form, though it felt something somewhat feminine. But the next time it came, it was distinctly feminine. It basically took over the show. And there was no doubt in my system, in response to that I was going to surrender. The grace is so extraordinarily fulfilling, so profoundly fulfilling, deeply empowering, deeply transformative, that even the ego gives way. Of course, when the grace recedes, the ego comes right back to do its mischief. Nature of ego, it's mischief. It could be apocalyptic mischief or just minor irritant mischief, but it's all mischief. So in the chapter previous, chapter 2, it talked about what happens when you surrender. The more capable you are of surrendering, the more you feel that the surrender, you're not doing the surrendering anymore. That the process is occurring through you, and that it's not you doing it. It's getting you off it. It's letting you go. It's relieving you of the burden of your I amness and the habit of your misery and your separateness. And it says here in the end of chapter 2, the more this conscious process replaces his own effort, the more rapid and true becomes his progress. But it cannot completely replace the necessity of personal effort until the surrender and consecration are pure and complete top to bottom. So one of the distinct aspects of surrender is this deep, profound relaxation. As if the burden of you has been lifted from your shoulders. That's the nature of the surrender, is this deep and profound relaxation. A letting go that you don't have to do anymore. A let-go-ness. An okayness. A willingness, a sense of surrender, freedom to be. All the stress of the human ego is endless, habitual stressing, worrying, anxiousness. You don't realize how much the whole system is locked up into this stress until it's gone. This is grace swallowed. When you have swallowed the grace, comes this relaxation. It's also been called nectar and ambrosia and margarita. It is that bliss of being, and then when it comes, everything just relaxes. Better than alcohol, better than drugs, better than sex, the whole damn thing just all falls away, and you're in this pure, relaxed, comfortable, real true comfort. Isn't dependent on physical comfort. Quality of being comes. So the third chapter is talking about moving into relationship to this grace, learning how to allow it to do its work. It moves from an active doing that the other two chapters, this relinquishing and this aspiration and this rejection, this activity of surrender. It moves away from that and starts showing how to move into the willingness to allow the surrender to do its work, to allow the grace to do its work. The surrender comes automatically when the grace is allowed to do its work. So the difference between surrender and the grace gets quite close, because once the grace is allowed, surrender is there, and you don't even know it's there because you're just in that state of complete relaxation with whatever occurs. Even when turbulence comes, it settles back into this tranquil quality of being. So with this, it talks about the underlying structure of fear, the foundational structure of fear that pervades all aspects of separative existence. Once ego came into existence, fear came into existence. Prior to that, it was experience. It was fight or flight, terror. It was immediacy. It was all immediacy. Fear is a creation of self-awareness. And we all carry that original stain, that original sin. When we got cast out the Garden of Eden, that's what became the curse. This existential anxiety, stress, fear. So how do we go beyond this fear? What is it that allows for this stress of being to relax? What is the relationship? What is it? What role does grace play in that ability to heal that underlying curse? It's very deeply rooted. Superstition, not just fear. Deep subconscious, collective consciousness, archetypal monsters and demons, hell and damnation, evil, devils. All of this is tied up into this structure of fear, this collective archetypal formation came from this moment of separation where ego came into existence. Prior to ego, these things didn't exist. Prior to separateness, these things were there, but they weren't defined as better or worse, or bad or good, or right or wrong. So grace brings in a healing balm. It moves us into connection to that original consciousness. Although now we're conscious, we're not unconscious. We're moving into that state we were in the womb, but we're fully awake and functioning human beings. Everything's taken care of. Everything you need is there. No stress, no need to go anywhere for anything. The fulfillment has come. This is the advantage of the path of experience. The path of experience doesn't do all the brutal work of truth, all the discrimination, all the struggle. It's just a constant yielding. But most people don't have that benefit. So I recognize most people have to struggle. They have to fight. Even myself, that had all the blessings of the experiential path, there was still effort. So Sri Aurobindo seems to be talking about that kind of efforting, a slightly different form, not as fierce, not as warrior-like, It's a more gentle way of going into the good night.
To walk through life armored against all fear, peril, and disaster, only two things are needed, two that go always together: the grace of the Divine Mother, and on your side, an inner state made up of faith, sincerity, and surrender.
Notice it's not talking about aspiration here. It's not identifying aspiration. It's talking about a different form of relationship to the grace as it's coming. Again, it's speaking of the two forces that in their conjunction can allow this accomplishment of this great endeavor. But in this case, instead of aspiration and surrender, it's speaking of faith, sincerity, and surrender. These are faith and sincerity. They're the feminine principles. Aspiration is a masculine principle. The surrendering is both feminine and masculine. So what is this faith? We've spoken of faith before many times. What is the nature of faith? Nature of faith is the quality of knowing within ourselves in some way what it is we're moving towards. So that even when there's no evidence, there is a sense of purpose or a sense of motion towards that which is yet to unfold, yet that which is yet to show itself. The nature of faith, rather than belief or trust, is important. Believing in something, is a mental structure. It only has as much strength as the disbelief will allow it. So belief is always dependent on the degree of disbelief that remains in the system. So it's still in duality. And trust. Trust is an emotional experience. It's a relational experience. It comes from the vital. And trust can only come proportional to the quantum of distrust we still carry. Whenever our trust is betrayed, or our belief is shattered, an event occurs in the duality, in the separative consciousness. When your belief is shattered, then you realize you were in error in the mental plane, perhaps. And when your trust is betrayed, then you realize the possibility of the error of your trust. Of course, who's the source of that error? That's the problem. But the experience of the error is there. Faith is outside of duality. It is an inner knowingness before the thing has come or happened of the very thing itself, so that even when there is distrust or disbelief, it keeps you moving towards it. This is how we go beyond our mind and our vital. Our distrust and our disbelief, our suspicious nature. What is the basis of all of these? Fear. Fear is the basis. Something to lose, something you're not going to be able to get, some inexplicable, dreaded outcome. Fear is the basis of trust and distrust, belief and disbelief. But faith has its basis in our essential being. Our capacity, already inherent in all of us, to know the eternal reality that we are. To whatever extent we have access to that quality of being that we are, determines how much faith is available to us and how capable we are of going beyond our trust, distrust, or belief, disbelief. definitely this is what happens. And I lived with my teacher, and there was a lot of disbelief. Distrust some, but disbelief definitely. The nature of where his of where he put his attention, of what his focus was, of what he put the emphasis on when he was available, his time and energy. I did not see someone who was demonstrating what I felt should have been demonstrated as a spiritual teacher. So it was my distrust and my disbelief. But my faith is what kept me there. And there was something nurturing that quality of beingness, that quality of my psychic self, that allowed that faith to persist even during these waves of disbelief and distrust. And this quality is grace. To have faith is already evidence that grace has come. How strong is the faith is determined about how much you have been challenged in your areas of belief and disbelief, trust and distrust. The more challenged you are, the more willing you are to go forward anyway, even when the evidence is saying it's not possible, you're not good enough, it's not good enough, it's not going to happen, the gods are against you, and you persist anyway. When you're too tired, when you can't do this one more day, and you do it anyway. You go each day, one day at a time, even when all the evidence and everything in your nature is saying, no, I can't do this anymore. Faith is what keeps us in the process. It's what keeps putting the hand in the fire. It's what keeps throwing us into the grinder. Sincerity. Faith, sincerity, and surrender. What is sincerity? Sincerity is integrality. To be in integrity. Integrality. In integrity. Sincerity means that what you are demonstrating is actually what you mean, what you are, how you act, what you speak. You could call it authenticity. But is this quality of alignment of the mind with the heart, and of the mind and the heart with the being, the degree of sincerity. We may be sincere in the mental plane, but maybe we're insincere in the vital plane. Or may sincerely want to be different, but we don't have the strength in the vital plane or the mental plane to be different. But we're sincerely in our longing, our movement towards the object of our faith, in which, of course, faith doesn't necessarily have an object. Sometimes it has an object. The object of our faith can vary. It can be God or Jesus or truth or a principle or an experience that happened once, of which the reflection is there with you, and there's this movement towards this sense of something greater. Sincerity determines how likely we are able to move towards our faith. So that we can be sincere in the mental but not sincere in the vital. We can be sincere in the vital but not sincere in the mental. We can be sincere in the vital and the mental, but the body betrays us. We have not met the body. We don't know it enough. It's not aligned enough. Or we've not met the emotions. We're not aligned enough. Our mind, our thinking, our memories, our stories, we don't know them enough. So we might be sincere in the heart, but our mind betrays us with its distrust, its suspicion, its depression, and its negativity. So sincerity is the alignment of the multiple parts of ourselves, sufficient alignment to allow us to be able to surrender, to let go, to go forward anyway. You see, these are really very closely intertwined. To have faith, to have sincerity, and to surrender. Each aids the other. the more faith you have, the more sincerity you have. The more faith and sincerity you have, the more surrender you have. The more surrender you have, the more faith you have. The more sincerity you have. The more the more sincerity you have, the more faith you have, and the more surrender you have. They all feed on each other. So it's talking about three components, like the Satchitananda, that are always working together. If I would say which is the most important, I would say faith. Faith is the most important. Faith, the quality of your faith is innate to your nature. It is innate to the design of your purpose this lifetime. There's a tamasic faith, there's a rajasic faith, there's a sattvic faith. And the nature of your faith determines what you can perceive is the fulfillment of the faith. It's not the thing itself, it's what you can perceive of the thing itself. It's only when you've gone beyond the gunas then can your faith meet the thing itself. And then, of course, there's no need for faith because you are then that.
Let your faith be pure, candid, and perfect. An egoistic faith in the mental and vital being, tainted by ambition, pride, vanity, mental arrogance, vital self-will, personal demand, desire for the petty satisfactions of the lower nature, is a low and smoke-obscured flame that cannot burn upwards to heaven. Regard your life as given you only for the divine work and to help in the divine manifestation. Desire nothing but the purity, force, light, wideness, calm, ananda of the divine consciousness and its insistence to transform and perfect your mind, life, and body. Ask for nothing but the divine, spiritual, and supramental truth, its realization on earth and in you and all who are called and chosen, and the conditions needed for its creation and its victory over all opposing forces.
So there's three aspects of that reading. First, it has to do with the definition of the things that distort the faith. What distorts faith? Desire, anger, fear. You can have faith and have all these things going on at the same time. This is the nature. Here's Sri Aurobindo coming back with his truth in this aspect of this. Let your faith be pure, candid, and perfect. It's a call. It's not a demand, it's a call. A call to a greater quality of faith, one that isn't an egoistic faith, based on the mental and vital. In the vital, obviously, it's tainted by ambition, by wanting to get something, desire. Faith has its reflection in desire, although desire is in itself an engine for action, of which desiring feeds on its desire. And if you've ever paid attention to the nature of desire is it wants to desire. And when it doesn't know what to do with itself when it's not desiring. So even when it gets what it wants to desire, it immediately, the object of its desire, it immediately starts desiring something else. A better version, a newer version, more of that, different than that. So the nature of desire is it distorting. It's rajas. It's impatient. It's restless. It makes demands. It's insistent. Pride. Pride comes with desire. What's the opposite of pride? Shame. Just like desire is the motion towards something that you don't believe you have or that you need to have to be fulfilled, shame is the opposite. The loss, the diminishment, the collapse, pride is the collapse of itself. Pride collapses into shame. Pride is built on shame. So there can only be so much pride, the pride is proportional to the shame that's not experienced. So the more shame, the more prideful. What is this? It's the same as fear. It's when we are compensating structures to avoid experiencing what the ego fears most, is what traps us every time. We get caught up in behaviors that are based on untruth, believing their truth, demanding their truth. Vanity, mental arrogance, vital self-will, personal demand, desire for the petty satisfactions of the lower nature. These are all desire. This is all rajas. This is what it says in the 3rd chapter of the Gita. What is it that causes me to commit sin, even against my own will? It is desire and anger that comes from rajas, and this is the real enemy. This is what destroys the faith. This is what distorts the sincerity. And this is what distorts the surrender. So he's pointing to the vital primarily here. And then the petty satisfactions of the lower nature, these are our addictions, our obsessions. The little clingings to things, the little pleasures, because that's what happens with the body. The body tends to capture consciousness with its pleasures. And we tend to become obsessed. They become in the connection between the body and consciousness is addiction. Addiction to comfort, addiction to the things that the body wants. So we end up in that being run by the demands of the body, run by the petty satisfaction of the less developed parts of ourselves. Addiction is a great distorter. I know the addiction, where you make one thing more important than everything else, even though that one thing gives no satisfaction. The nature of addiction is, of course, there's the honeymoon period, there's the enchantment, the enthrallment of the addiction, but after a while it's just maintenance. And before you know it, you're doing a thing that doesn't give you any pleasure, but you can't stop it. It's because of the connection between consciousness and the body that keeps this Pavlovian pleasure button being pushed. That's why quitting smoking, quitting drugs, quitting alcohol, quitting sex is so difficult, because this is hardwired into the sensory body, into the 5 senses in the mind. And then when we develop these specific little channels of payoff, it's very hard to stop pushing them. Or all we need to do is see a commercial, or look in the refrigerator, or see a woman in a magazine. And bang, there it's right back, alive and well, ready to take over your whole life. Surrender, screw surrender. Faith, I don't know what you're talking about. Sincerity, I don't give a damn. It just goes all out the window. The petty satisfaction is a low and smoke obscured flame that cannot burn upward to heaven. So we need something more than these things. We need to have a principle, an organizing principle for being that isn't based on the mind or the vital, isn't based on pride and vanity and mental arrogance and vital self-will, the ego, the I am-ness that needs constant reinforcing, constant feeding, negative or positive ego. It has to have a different basis. It has a different organizing principle of instead of self-serving, self-giving. And how do we move out of that self-absorbing, self-serving orientation of our individual, separate human identity, especially when we're raised in a culture of indulgence and pampering? Is you have to find your purpose. You have to get in touch with the purpose. If you don't have access to this purpose, if there is something in you that doesn't have access to this purpose, this book is irrelevant. There's no capacity for surrender. There's no true sincerity. The only sincerity is a strategy to get what you want and avoid what you don't want. And there is no faith. So we have to find the purpose, the organizing principle of why we should do this. And usually that purpose is revealed, like it was for me, in the moment of the grace. When the grace comes, the moment the grace comes, your purpose is brought to the surface. You know that that's what it is, that consciously or unconsciously you've been seeking all your life. And then all these lesser pleasures, all these smoke obscurations of vanity and ambition, self-will, selfishness, they lose their authority over our consciousness. Our consciousness wakes up out of its slumber and it gets in touch with something greater than itself. And when it gets in touch with that, what is that? That's the current of existing, the reason to be, the reason for your existence. That's purpose. So when, in this case, regard your life as given you only for the purpose of the divine work. I'm adding the purpose. Only for the divine work. What is it? To manifest that quality of grace that you're able to access. To bring it into life, into your life. Desire nothing but the purity, force, light, wideness, calm, ananda of this grace, of this divine consciousness. And its insistence to transform and perfect you. Grace isn't just passive. It pushes. It pushes you on your purpose. But it's not quite that. The purpose starts living you. The grace starts living you. And that principle that's living you is what demands you to go beyond yourself. To reject the slow burning, obscure patterns of living and behaving and reacting. And you begin to true yourself in the process. Lifting the vibration. Stepping out of your old ways of compensating and adapting to life. Creating a new way to be purposefully. Going beyond those small habitual patterns of your being. When you do that, when you reject the arrogance, when you catch yourself in arrogance, when you catch yourself in pride or ambition, the vital self-will, the personal demand, and you stop and you get off it. While it's going, you stop feeding it, you stop acting on it, you stop believing it, you withdraw your consent from it, then immediately this purity, force, light, wideness, calm, ananda of the divine consciousness comes to you. Because it's right there trying to manifest itself. And when you get out of the way, when you get off of these things, when you let go of these things, it becomes immediately available to you. It's really quite immediately. Peace comes instantly when we relinquish the outcome of the action. 12th chapter of the Gita. Of all the practices, this surrendering, this letting go, this getting off it, is the most powerful because peace comes instantly. And it's not just the word peace, it's all these things. It's the quality of grace itself. The inherent quality of the Satchitananda itself. The current that lives you. There is nothing more fulfilling, nothing more enlivening, more nurturing, more healing, more transformative, more awakening, more real than when you access this current, this grace, this purpose. And what is this divine work? It's to manifest this purpose in yourself and in the world about you. The divine work is the manifestation. This is the divine work, the surrendering, the letting go, the rejecting, the self-inquiring, the seeing where we get distorted, and then to pull back from that. This capacity to objectify our person, to be able to see the nature of what it is that's keeping us enthralled or distracted or caught up in desire, ambition, competition, protection, demand. Each time we assert our authority, each time we assert our true authority, each time our inner being, our I am-ness aligns with this grace, it has a power far more than you do when you're in your own usual human condition. So it's pushing only in that way. It's lifting. It's showing you a way of being that doesn't allow you to become comfortable or satisfied in those lesser ways of being. That's the push. Is this recognition of the untruth of how you were. It pushes you to be more, and it gives you the strength to act differently, to be different. And more than that, it actually conducts a process of transformation in the very cellular structure of your body that starts assisting you in coming out of the habit of your human embodiment. It begins from the inside out to bring more sincerity, the inside out to bring more faith versus trust or belief. It starts working on both sides, the outside and the inside. Until that which was before inside is displaced, and only the divine is doing the seeking. It's divine, the source of divine is seeking its source in the grace. Divine seeking divine. And then, ask for nothing. Ask for nothing for yourself. Ask for no justification or confirmation or affirmation for your ego, for your desire, for your demand, for your righteousness, for your insistence, for your complaint. You discard the whole rationalization and justification structure. You keep choosing what is. You keep letting go and getting off it. Ask for nothing. Be fulfilled with what you have. Let what you have be exactly what's needed to be in order for this divine work to be accomplished. The but in there is truly something that you can ask for. The divine, spiritual, and supermental truth is realization on earth and in you and in all who are called and chosen. And the conditions needed for its creation and its victory over all opposing forces. Wow, beautifully said. That's beautifully said. But ask for nothing but this one thing. The fulfillment of the purpose. The fulfillment of the reason we were all born. The fulfillment of that manifestation of the principle the grace opens us up to. Be in that field. Be in that sat, chit, ananda, that consciousness, existence, and love. The bliss. That you can ask for. Ask for more and more and more. But let it come from that place of surrender, of sincerity and faith, rather than demand, insistence, frustration, dissatisfaction, complaint.
Let your sincerity and surrender be genuine and entire. When you give yourself, give completely, without demand, without condition, without reservation. so that all in you shall belong to the Divine Mother, and nothing be left to the ego or given to any other power.
This is a consecrated life. This is a pointing to the organization of your attention, your consciousness, totally for this principle, for this manifestation. This aligning of our focus from all the other things we could be doing or that we endlessly doing in the course of our days or in the course of our life, or all the other things we could make important or put on our move up on our priority list. Give yourself completely, without demand, without condition, without reservation. So when the grace started coming to me, the instinct was to give it all the room I wanted. The only thing is I didn't know that my life was wired up in such a way that I wasn't going to allow it to happen. I had too much momentum behind my desire, behind my ambition, behind my sense of responsibility and work and obligation as an architect and my community activities. That was the motivating principle, and it was running my life at a very high degree. So when this grace came in, although there was this complete willingness, I didn't recognize all these other parts of myself were what was preventing it from coming continuously. It wasn't until the next weekend where I wasn't so busy that it could start coming in, and pretty soon I got a clue that it was something that I was doing that was in the way of this grace coming. And once I got hip to that, then I began to redesign my life so that all there would be this space and capacity, time to give my full attention to the grace. So this is happening for quite a few of you here. The nature of the grace is when it comes, it's like feeling the need to meditate, or feeling this need to go deeper, to go inward. But you have things that you have to do outwardly. So in the course of your life, if you make those outward things more important, then you're going to close down the grace. Now, Sri Aurobindo wasn't telling the people around him to stop doing the work they were doing for him, because he knew that seva, that work, was also a practice, and that the effort applied in doing seva is one of the three major principles of gaining the quality that grace points to. This quality of humility, self-inquiry, and service. The third one is service. It's an anchor stone. It's one of the three major principles that allows us to become what it is we strive to become. So, service is not a distraction from the divine manifestation. It actually aids the divine manifestation. But here he's pointing to that when it's otherwise possible, when the energy, when the grace starts flowing, stop and be with the grace. And here's what happens. It completes. It comes in for a while, maybe hours, it may be minutes, maybe days, but it will complete if you give it its time. That means it comes in stages, and it completes its work for a period of time, and then you can function again, then you can be in the world again, then you can be a person again. And then it comes again, and then each time, as we become skillful to surrender to the coming of the grace, it could be in your awareness, it could be in your experience, it could be in both. The more the grace does the work, and the less you do the work. So that's what it's pointing to. So when I was able to finally go to India, I let the grace do the work, and what it would do is it would complete. It would complete, and then I wish I had something to do. So we don't have that problem around me. But the nature of this is still the same, is that when we can make time for the grace. And the thing that I notice is that when you're surrendered, the grace is willing to negotiate with you. If there is something you have to do in the world that's consistent with your Dharma, the grace will back off until those moments. Not always. Sometimes it'll come in and knock you out, no matter where you are. It'll just stop you in your tracks. Or you just can't get a thought in your head. You can't focus on what's before you. These are all interim stages. this interim being taken over by the grace, is the part of the grace filling up the cup. And in the process, expanding the cup so it can fill up more and more. But there comes a point where the saturation is fulfilled, and the curious thing is that you can be both the grace and the person. That the grace becomes you, and you become the grace. And then you can do whatever needs to be done. Because you're always, no faith is required, no surrender is required, no sincerity is required, because you are it. But until then, this is the effort required.
The more complete your faith, sincerity, and surrender, the more will grace and protection be with you. And when the grace and protection of the Divine Mother are with you, what is there that can touch you, or whom need you fear? A little of it even will carry you through all difficulties, obstacles, and dangers. Surrounded by its full presence, you can go securely on your way, because it is hers, careless of all menace, unaffected by any hostility, however powerful, whether from this world or from worlds invisible.
Yep. And this is what I was pointing to when I started this. When the grace comes, what is there to fear? It's as if you're in the arms of the Mother. You've taken into the embrace of all existence. The responsibility, the burden of you is lifted. The stress, the efforting is lifted. This whole thing of subconscious dread, subconscious fear, subconscious anxiety, this all disappears. And you feel completely safe, completely at home. This is the quality of when the grace comes. And the curious thing about it is, even if you go naively into a ghetto or into a knife fight or a bar, you have no fear, no defensiveness, no reaction. People get it. If they come at you with anger, they get there's nobody here. The anger loses its strength. If somebody comes at you with demand or assistance, they get it. And that anger or just insistence falls away. You have nothing that you have to do, because at that point the grace is living you. The grace is protecting you. There is not even efforting to not have a demand. There is no demand. This quality of fulfillment is radiated out of you. And it protects you. The world either doesn't notice you, where it's doing its havoc to everyone else, or if it does notice you, it gets converted by being in your presence. It gets deflected. It's so strange how this happens. Other people can be all upset around you and you're not upset. There's nothing in you that's upset. It's like you're living in a complete different envelope of being, but you're not in airy fairyland. You're not in awareness. You're not in a bubble, a balloon, disconnected from the world. You're here, embodied, feeling this utter embodied quality of presence. That's more than you. Not you and more than you at the same time. You know, I used to read this verse and I would just, careless of all menace, unaffected by any hostility, however powerful, whether from this world or from other worlds invisible. This field of grace that's around the teacher, this quality of grace, there's nothing in the subtle world that can touch you. You are utterly protected. It brings in guides and beings that make certain and to preserve the quality of consciousness you're demonstrating. It's only when you fall out of that grace that we become vulnerable. But even then, if you're living with the teacher, if you're living in the environment, if you're serving the work of the teacher, all the usual trepidations and fear and worries and anxieties fall away. It's one of the symptoms of grace. Somehow you know it'll all work. Somehow you know that'll all come out for the better. This quality of faith, this quality of your natural self, your sincerity, you feeling you're no longer in your compensating ego. You're no longer in the struggle of you. So there's this natural authenticity, this natural way of being, which is, we could call sincere. Something else is living it. It's evidence. This is why when I would go into the subtle plane and I would have these visions of horrific monsters, or I'd be being worked on by creatures that were putting things directly into my eye, into my eyeballs. I would have all these. I had no fear. I never had any fear, and people would describe these experiences alien abductions. There were books about the same thing happening to people that got caught between two worlds in this subtle plane where people are being transformed by this force. They would misinterpret their semi-dream state into something threatening. Something was trying to harm them because it was so unfamiliar. But in the state I was in, I had all kinds of horrific experiences, hell domains that I traveled through. Just had this happen yesterday. But there was never any fear. There was never any loss of faith. Or, well, something's wrong with me, or I must have done something wrong. None of that comes up. There's just this completely held quality of presence that knows no harm can possibly come to anything that's true and real. And that allows for life to reveal those things we need to see that we haven't been able to see, to be with things that we haven't been able to be with. Because once you can be with everything, there is no fear. All there is love. All there is connection. All there is grace. So what is there that you could possibly fear? It's all you. It's all expression of that quality of what you are. This was very tangible for me because in India I was having lots of very vigorous subtle plane experiences, and the ashram was full. He would keep bringing in people off the streets, and everybody in the ashram would pick up the energy. And there were some really bad, nasty psychic people in India. Really dark, nasty psychic people. And he would bring them into the street, and he wasn't being disturbed by it because he knew, at least I was one of the people who was handling all the energies. And they would attack. They would try to seduce and attack. That's what they was doing.
Why did he do that? Why did he do that?
He was strengthening my system.
Oh.
He kept testing it this way. Sometimes he would be there with me, so I knew. Other times it was me alone in terms of whatever was arising. I know it's often quite hard on the body, but I never, it never was, I never had terror, I never had fear. The only thing, I may have questioned my role in the mental plane. I had mental ideas of why this was happening. But I never believed them. They were all inner constructs to explain. And when I stayed with them, they all moved on. No matter what was the nature of the attack or the nature of the structure that was coming at me. And actually, the more dramatic it was, the easier it was for me to be with. Because my mental mind, my scientific Western mind couldn't believe it. So it didn't hook me into a mental story of superstition or fear. It couldn't hook me in my mind. But it could hook parts of my vital. And the vital was very linked to the body. So there could be this reaction, energetic reaction, to these insults and these attacks and these seductions that would come. Captivating energies, intoxicating qualities in the seductions. It's not just sexual or physical, it's energetic powers, visions, all kinds of things come. But to able to just rest in this field of protection, this rest of asking for nothing, watching, allowing it all to come up without claiming any of it, not identifying with myself as the source of it or in claiming the consequences or what its purpose was. I didn't need to understand anything. It just needed to go through me. It just needed to be experienced. This is when I began to learn about unconditional love. And I began to see the nature of letting things just go through. There's a verse in the 2nd chapter of the Gita that says, like an ocean that receives all the waters, all the rivers, yet remains unchanged. This is what all the streams of possible experience that were there in the subtle worlds were coming into me, but the quality of me that was unchanged was always there while that was occurring. As if I was held while it was happening.
Its touch can turn difficulties into opportunities, failure into success, and weakness into unfaltering strength. For the grace of the Divine Mother is the sanction of the Supreme, and now or tomorrow its effect is sure, a thing decreed, inevitable and irresistible.
This is where the word purpose, the sense of the purposefulness of it. It's not significant, but it's purposeful. It could be monsters and dragons and bears. It can be all your worst nightmares. It could be dreads and revelations about things you never saw before. It could be personifications of evil. All of these things are just arising in the context of the purpose. This is the nature of the faith. The more aligned you are with the purpose, the greater is the faith. And the greater is the faith, the greater is its capacity to recognize that everything is arising as an opportunity for greater truth, for greater love, greater aliveness to come into existence. It's resilience in its optimism, incredibly resilient in its ability to see the purposefulness. So I'm not just spinning when I tell a story about what you're experiencing as being an indication of your development. I'm not just giving you another way of looking at it. I'm actually speaking the truth. That it's all purposeful, no matter what the difficulty or the challenge, the limitation, the distraction, or your failure, or your fall is. It's all part of a stream of events that have had to occur for it to manifest itself. There comes a time when the grace gets established enough and you can see that everything that ever happened in your life was exactly what needed to happen so that what you are now could be. So when the grace comes, you see the lineage, you see the purposefulness, you see that it was headed somewhere all along, even though you had no clue. All your errors, all your churning ways, all your attachments and clings and rebellions and resistances and demands and angers, all your limitations and all your accomplishments, all your successes. These were all just part of a stream of movements, of experiencings that needed to have gone through so that the purpose could manifest itself as much as it has right here, right now. It turns difficulties into opportunities, failures into success, and weakness into unfaltering strength. The very things that you think are defeating you on the spiritual path are exactly the things that you will be your strengths when you have gone through that process. The very things that seem to be where the ego is defeating you becomes your resilience and your capacity to teach from wisdom, becomes a freedom to no longer be bound by these habitual structures. The grace of the Divine Mother is the sanction of the Supreme. I want to talk about sanction. Sanction, the grace. When the grace has come, you have been chosen. The person that you are has been chosen. The universe has chosen you to be the vessel of itself. The sanction is the recognition that the universe is seeing the possibility of itself manifesting as you. And that sanction, and I got to tell you, this sanction is very real. This is very true. The sanction of the Supreme, and now or tomorrow, its effect is sure, a thing decreed, inevitable, and irresistible. It cannot be defeated. It isn't in that category of defeat or victory. It is of a complete different order. When the sanction comes, when you can get the sanction, when you can get that you have been sanctioned by divine, then what this chapter points to has manifested itself. I remember I had come back from being with my teacher. I was still going. I hadn't come to my independence yet. I was thinking 2007 or so, and my brother was involved in a program, Berkeley Psychic School, in Santa Rosa, and they would do readings. And he wanted to introduce me to this domain of things, and so I went to participate. And what happened is immediately people reacted to me. These psychic readers reacted to me. And they said, "What are you trying to do to me?" And all I was feeling was love and gratitude. They were saying, "What are you trying to do with me? I don't know about his energy. What is this energy?" It's like some kind of shield. And the person who was managing the three, who was more developed, he says, No, that's not what's going on. That's not what's going on. He has the sanction. The sanction, he could recognize it. And I heard that, and I said, oh, that's what this is. This is like a golden shield of the heart. It was like a golden, I partook in their perception. It was a golden shield of the heart that I was carrying. I didn't know I was carrying. But in that moment, I recognized, oh, that's a sanction. I never forgot that, because that's when I realized I had been sanctioned. Prior to that, of course I had been sanctioned, but I didn't realize it. That it was a perceptible quality to those who could perceive it. So when the sanction comes, and you may not know it, you may not know you've been sanctioned. You can have all these experiences and not know the sanction has come. You know, even when my teacher sanctioned me, and he said, I am satisfied with all the work Scott had done at this time in 2004, and I give him this name, Siddhartha, and he had 25 people sign this document that confirmed his sanction. I didn't get it. It wasn't until 3 years later that I got it. What it means is you can do no wrong. That there's such purity, there's such sincerity, there's such faith, that whatever you do from that place is manifesting the grace. So that's what the sanction of the Supreme, the outcome is inevitable. You can rest assured it will manifest as you. This is what this chapter is pointing to. When you can get the sanction, then you get to experience the grace you've become. The universe has become you, and now you get to know yourself as the universe. All right, that's the message of this chapter, and actually these first 3 chapters have a singular theme, which will be expressed in the 5th chapter. But that we will do after we do the 4th chapter, which is curiously in the Mother Book, the money power. Okay, so now let's finish. Is there any questions or interactions? Anything you want to bring forward? You have a little time. This was a relatively short chapter. Did you get it? Thumbs up if you got it.
Yeah, thumbs up.
Yeah, very well.
It just, I was thinking about, it feels like there's just the shift away from aspiration. When that, this third chapter it's helpful because it seems to be replaced actually by something that feels like willingness.
Very good. That's what it's pointing to. Exactly that. It's pointing to a different. The seeking is more about finding now. See, aspiration's more in the seeking. In the finding, it's more about this surrender, this sincerity, this faith. Can we meditate? The grace is overtaking the room.
Yes.
All right, we'll meditate.